Casey's mom left this world too soon, but she left Casey a wonderful gift.
Yeah, humor. It's the greatest gift I've ever been given. It's the greatest tool to work through trauma and to have for creativity. My mom was so funny that people would be, they would be dying laughing. They would be like, I hope your mom sits by me. She will just say the funniest things. And so humor was really just baked into our family. And so I think with humor, a lot is forgiven with people. And not to mention, I've made a career out of it.
Welcome to In This Family, presented by Nexus Family Healing. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO. Casey Wilson is an actor, writer, and podcast host. She was a cast member on Saturday Night Live for 2 years and starred on shows like Happy Endings and Black Monday. She's appeared in several films, including Gone Girl and Julie and Julia. And Casey is the author of the bestseller, The Wreckage of My Presence, and co-hosts the hit podcast, Bitch Sesh. Casey and her husband have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and besides all her work in television and comedy, Casey, her father, and her brother help run the Kathy Wilson Foundation. It's an organization that's focused on helping children with disabilities, and it was named after Casey's mom, who died of heart failure in 2005. I talked with Casey Wilson about who her mother was, what Casey came to understand about her mom after she had passed, and her own life as a mother today. It's a story of love, grief, addiction, and acceptance. Well, Casey Wilson, welcome to In This Family.
Hi.
All right, so maybe just to start off, Casey, can you just tell me about your home growing up? Who was there? Who's in your family?
Yeah, so growing up, I have one brother who's 3 years younger than me, and then my parents, and we grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, so right outside of D.C., and both my parents were in politics. And yeah, it was quite a livelier household. Both my parents, huge personalities.
Can you just kind of give me an overview of how mental health has shown up in either your family of origin and even your family now, and then maybe that'll kind of lead us into some other questions.
I think it's so interesting because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I'm the oldest millennial that's ever lived, and the oldest. I think, my parents didn't go to therapy or anything like that. And so, which I'm thankfully, my mom actually, I remember when I broke up with a boyfriend, she said, well, do you want to talk to someone? And I didn't even know, obviously, what that meant. Mm-hmm. And I went one time in high school, and I got so much out of that 1 hour that I have been with the same therapist since I was 20, and I'm 45. So
that is really cool.
I know, I have to say, because I can really link it back to then. So I'm very thankful that, my mom and dad modeled that that's fine to talk to someone, even though they themselves not only wouldn't.
Did they need to?
Well, I think everybody could probably benefit from it. I think my parents, like I said, they both had huge personalities. I think knowing what I know, and obviously don't want to diagnose anyone, but I have raging ADHD, as I'm sure you've even seen from scheduling this podcast. But I think my dad did too, but also with a huge fun personality. And my mom had a huge personality and was a feminist activist and very funny and Italian. So it was very loud and a lot of fighting, but then making up really quick and no real making up, then you're fine. And it was just a lot going on, I would say.
So you're an actor, podcaster, writer. Can you just give a brief summary of when did you start performing and kind of what led you to that path?
Yeah. Well, it sounds kind of hokey, but it is true. So one day my dad was in our attic and he found that the previous owners had left these theater curtains, red velvet, elaborate theater curtains. And I always like to perform just in the living room. And he built a stage for me in the backyard. And I mean, it was like a raised wood platform, but it had a backstage area and obviously the curtains. And then I started writing plays for the neighborhood kids. And I was like 8, I think, when I started, and directing them and obviously starring in them.
That's awesome.
I would give the lead part to someone else, and then somehow it would end up with me. And my parents were so embarrassed because my mom, I remember, had to walk me over to a girl across the streets. And I'm like, she doesn't know the lines. And my mom's like, I know, but firing someone, it's not very nice. And I said, she's still in it. She just doesn't know the lines. And so I made this poor girl, I'm so sorry to Megan, be a telephone where she had to crouch on the ground with one arm over her head as the receiver. And I used her body as a phone. And I was obviously the lead then. So anyway, and then I did Cats, the sequel, after my dad took me to see Cats in New York. And then my dad took me to see Second City in Chicago when I was very young. And then my mom and I watched SNL, and it just sort of, I just realized, oh, I really like this. And then, and this might be too long of an answer, but I remember I did this play called Fame. And I got this role that I thought was like small. It was like 4 lines. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. You know, I was in middle school. I didn't even care. And I thought, I'm going to go to my mom's closet and just get a crazy outfit, because she was a stage mom, the role. And I did my lines, and everybody laughed. And I was like, wow, this is the greatest moment of my life. And I remember deciding then, like, I'm going to be an actor.
So I'm sort of curious, like, as when you were a child and you daydreamed about, you know, being a big star, what was the genre that you were daydreaming about?
So, I mean, the funny thing is, like, I, as a kid, would read that magazine, More magazine, for like women in their mid-40s. And I would always read like Irma Bombeck's books about like being a harried mom when I was like 10. So I've always had this like, so the movie that I looked to for my genre of acting was Terms of Endearment, which it was a very sad movie. My mom and I loved it. And I just thought, but again, I didn't link up that what Deborah Winger and Shirley MacLaine are, and obviously we all know that movie to be very sad, but I think what people don't really realize is how funny it is, because the sad part at the end is so tragic, but it is kind of a comedy until then of sorts, and a heartfelt comedy. And so I don't know, I always just thought, well, Shirley MacLaine, who also was from Alexandria, I found that out later, but I just loved what they were doing. But I didn't really realize, like, oh, these are comedic actresses who are also have the range and the depth, and they kind of do it all. But what I was responding to with them was how funny they were.
Wow, that is an interesting twist, that such a sad movie can also bring on that connection to the funny. And if I remember that movie, there was such a spark in the reality of the relationship.
Yes.
That brought that funny out too.
Yes, it's very grounded. And the comedy is in relationship, like you're saying, which I think James L. Brooks, that's his style, which is so wonderful, which is, yes, you're laughing, but the mother and daughter had a very toxic / wonderful relationship, which I think my mom and I had. And I loved seeing that, which is like, oh, you can have both, I think. I am a person that can very much hold 2 truths. And at points I would be walking on eggshells with my mom, and then also marveling at how funny and captivating she was. And I knew she loved me so much. It was very kind of all different things, you know, and I don't like when people want to reduce their childhoods, and I've never lived anyone else's childhoods, but like all bad, you know, if there was something bad, I guess. But maybe that's my own wanting it to have tell myself it was a different way.
I want to lean a little bit more into your relationship with your mom. You know, the Terms of Endearment kind of sticks out for you between, you'd mentioned like the toxicity of the relationship, but also just the intense love and engagement.
Yeah.
Talk about how that kind of mirrors your experience with your mother in particular.
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing. So I'm 45. My mom passed away when I was 24, I think, about 24, of a heart attack. And it's been this long journey of, I'm only telling it backwards just so you kind of understand, of not having known a very central piece of our relationship until about 10 years after she passed away. So as a kid, I experienced, oh, my mom is so fun and present and the president of the PTA, and here she is doing everything, and And after politics, she became the director of a preschool, and she was a big advocate for kids and fun. So you would look at her and think, what a high functioning person, because she was. There's no other way to read it. But then I would see a kind of darker flip side, which is that then she would have to be in bed all weekend and not come out of her room. And there would be a lot of anger, or it would just vacillate. So it definitely created this environment of walking on eggshells, which I think is a very tough environment. And in the sense that you're just never quite sure, are we going to have like the best time of our lives? Or is this, or maybe I'm going to say I got a bad grade and it's fine, or maybe it's not. You just don't know. And then she would act very erratically. And so my brother and I didn't really know what was going on. And so that was sort of the thing. But looking back, I'm like, oh, but she wasn't like swaying and swerving around like you would think someone who was drinking. And she didn't drink. So then I kind of thought maybe she was an alcoholic, but the behavior is still there. So I really just didn't know. And then about 10 years after my mom died, I called my dad and I said I'd had my son and I gained so much weight and I was really frustrated. And I said to him, I don't know. I just in frustration, I said, I don't know. Some people, actors do these diet pills and I don't know. Maybe I will do that, but I was kind of just, and my dad said, well, I need to tell you something. And he really got serious and he said, I'm telling you this because I just want you to know that, your mom was addicted to Ritalin. And she started it to lose weight in the 80s, which a lot of like suburban moms actually had an issue. That's Ritalin is akin to, what do you call it?
A stimulant or?
Yeah, it's like and it is an ADHD medication, which has been its own journey now for me, kind of genuinely finally coming to the fact that I need a medication like that, but it doesn't have to be abused. But all is to say, when I learned that, it was like looking at a puzzle of your whole family, but you don't have the main piece. You don't have the central piece. And it obviously made so much sense. It's like, oh, that's someone who is so fun and capable and doing so much for my school and for me, but then is up at night, like making collages for the kids at her preschool. All of it coming from this place of like, I want to do it all. But then the crash of it, it's a very brutal, relentless drug if you're addicted to it. Brutal. And very hard to get off. And the lows are just so low. What goes up must come down. And I think, you take that drug to go up. And, a lot of women, it helps you lose weight. And I think it just gives you energy. And I really saw, wow, to have energy. I think my mom, and I am sad for it too now because I'm like, oh, I'm a mom of 3 kids. I'm working full time. I'm so tired. So I get it, and you want to be all things. And my mom was like certainly a leader of second wave feminism. So she's like, I'm doing it all, and I'm fought for this great job I have. And so I'm doing that. But then I also need to, her mom was Italian, cooking all day and doing all this on the home front. So I think, again, there was a sense of striving in my family that I think was to my mom's detriment ultimately. Because what I then later learned is that she'd gone on and off it. But then when she passed away, my dad saw that she was still on it. He didn't know. And basically it speeds up your heart. And that's the ultimate thing. And so it had always also been very puzzling to any doctor I talked to, because it wasn't that she was so overweight or just to say things that you might think for a woman to die at 54 who's relatively healthy. And I remember doctors would be like, really? That's so rare. That's very rare. And so it all just sort of, it's definitely been something to reckon with, the thought of, wow, someone who is actually trying to use a drug. And I have so no judgment for anyone who's on alcoholic. I have like the most non-judgment feeling about that. I just feel compassion. But especially I will say, and maybe it's because I want to feel this, but there's a sadness to it being to be like a better version of yourself in it, if that makes sense. There was something that just really bummed me out about that aspect of it. But that I also was like, I don't know the right word, but like there was a quality of it that I think she did try to do for my brother. And I think she ultimately probably needed different medications and didn't go see anyone or have access to them. And then this just sort of became the like fix, I guess.
And there's so many thoughts related to that. I just think about, your mom was a woman activist, really into the women's movement, and hear this movement, especially during that time. Yeah, you can have it all, but can you
Yes.
really? Like, women strive to do everything, and it's really hard to do it all for anybody, man,
Oh, yeah.
woman, whatever. And then the drug addiction, or the reliance on a
Yeah.
particular drug to keep yourself going, to do it all.
But definitely addiction, because also people take that drug all the time in the right dose and it's fine, but this is when you are taking too much, it is a very brutal come down. Very brutal.
So what did you think about the fact that you never knew that while your mom was alive?
I think what I've come to learn is that when my dad did find out, my mom actually went to a treatment center, but I was really young, so I don't even really remember that. And then my mom started really hiding it from my dad. So there was also an element of, again, you're not swerving drunk and slurring. Like, it actually mimics a very functioning person when you're on it. So if anything, you're like, oh, this person's really together. That's what it's for. But then I think my dad just didn't either want to see it or see it in that way. And then I think when she passed away, he did go, and actually I think he confronted the doctor that was prescribing it to her after she passed away. Not in a mean way. I think he also just like wanted answers about it, because he really for years thought she was going on and off, but was having trouble like tracking it. Which now I'm like, well, I think it was pretty obvious. But then it was confusing because there would be like 2-year period where I wouldn't feel this. So I think that then when she passed away, now when I tell you again, my father's the most like, he's such a happy-go-lucky, like right in the moment guy. He's not thinking too hard on any kind of like something he says to someone will have emotional resonance. That's not him. Everybody loves him, but he's just like, I'm living in the moment. The idea that my dad actually thought this through, and I'm really grateful. He said, I didn't want to necessarily get into all of that right away when she died. I thought that might be a bit too difficult to be like, okay, my mom's died very suddenly. You guys don't have your own partners and families. You're kind of in that in-between time of life where I always say I felt like John Hamm at the top opening of Mad Men when he's like just falling. Like, I don't have a family I'm trying to figure out my career and my life. He just said I felt that might be, he didn't say too destabilizing, but I think that's what he meant. And I actually am grateful that we got to sort of like grieve my mom as a person, not as like someone addicted to something.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a nice gift.
But I'm also so glad I know. I think that would have been such a thing you just are stumped and stymied by forever.
Yeah, and the way you were describing her when she was on the Ritalin, was it the Ritalin that was kind of making her sort of manic a little bit and then really low depressive? I mean,
Yes.
It sounds like almost like a manic depressive.
Yes. So I, to this day, what I don't know is, was she manic depressive and this was exacerbating it? I think there was probably just like depression there, but maybe also ADHD, to the sense of like my brother and I both have it to such a degree that maybe that's what she was responding to, of like, oh, well, this medication does make these particular things I have going on feel better, so why not take more? I don't know if it was just depression. I've thought that too. I really don't know. But it clearly was something.
And when you talked about needing to like walk on eggshells at different times, or just being really sensitive to her mood and and needing to kind of gauge yourself around that, do you remember any particular stories that stand out to you, or instances?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there would just be, very volatile moments and a lot of yelling, and then very erratic things. Like one thing I remember, and this wasn't even, I mean, it's in the category of walking on eggshells, but just where you're like, I cannot believe I'm even seeing this happen, where we went to our church to decorate for Christmas, and all the families come to try to help drag out all the boxes and decorate. So we're all decorating. And I'm with my dear friends, go to the church too, and their parents know my mom. And I am like, where's my mom? Now, first I see that she's fallen asleep on a pew, which is so shocking. I mean, again, I can't tell you, like, the other version of her would be like, I'm running this. I'm actually the one organizing. And I was so surprised. Then I can't find her. And I'm like, but when I saw her sleep on the pew, I was like, I have never been so embarrassed. So my brother and I really became adept, and we both have this, of being like, we're normal. We want everyone to think we're normal. No matter what's happening, there's an excuse for that, and we're fun and normal. And that's like, don't look over there. We really want people to think we're normal, which is comical because we're kind of not, but it's like our obsession in life is monitoring everyone's micro mood and micro thought about us and trying to get out ahead of it and please see us normal. And then that same day I'm like, but now I can't find her. Now I'm like, where is she? And my best friend's mom, who I'm still so close with, was my mom's best friend. So it's been so amazing to have Diane in my life and Amanda because, they knew my mom so well. Diane's like my second mom. And I remember she came up to me and she said, Casey, I think, and she didn't even know how to say this. She's like, I think your mom walked up the street to our house and is sleeping in my bed, is taking a nap in my room. Now I'm like trying to compute this, like, what? And it was so crazy that I just couldn't even imagine why my mom would walk to Diane's house and get in her bed. And it was just so crazy. And I remember at that point, I was like, I don't have an excuse for this. I don't know what to say. And Diane was like, oh, don't you even worry about it. I'm sure she's tired and don't worry about it. And of course, Diane knows what's going on. And she did know. And she kept being like, it's so fine and everybody gets tired. And you're actually kind of like grateful for that because as a kid, you're trying to show everybody else it's fine. But I remember being like, well, I don't have anything to say about this. I don't have a way to explain this at all. And finally an adult sort of going, don't worry about it. Like, I understand this and you don't have to explain this to me. And so even in adulthood, it's been amazing to have Diane, who, just like me, knows the upside of my mom and then knows the struggles. So yeah, so there was just an always of like, oh God, what's going to happen next sense of things. And then you'd go, oh, nothing happened. Why was I worried? That's crazy. But then something so tiny would happen that, she would get so mad. And you're like, I just don't know what effect I will have on someone. And so I think it skews your reality a bit, even as an adult. If someone, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. If someone texts back something that seems cold, I'm going, oh my God, they hate me. They don't ever want to speak to me again. Oh no. And then later they're like, Casey, oh my God, I was just with the kids. What are you talking about? And I often can't see normal, quote unquote, behavior. I see it as so scary sometimes. I'm so sorry, I'm crying.
You know what? I really appreciate that you're actually feeling a lot about this. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your true self. What do you think is going on for you as you're thinking about this?
It's not that I don't think about it a lot, but I think I've thought about it so much over the years that it's such a fact for me. So something about saying it. I feel so many emotions. One is like, oh, I want everyone to understand, though, that I'm very protective of my mom. And not even as a way of like, I'm a kid and I feel I have to protect her, but just of like, you all aren't hearing her. You're hearing this story. But everyone that met her, you can't even imagine the things they would tell me that she had done for them or helped them with. And so sometimes it's a tricky thing to talk about because I don't like to reduce someone to their addiction. I really don't like that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is just kind of a combination of really understanding and having a lot of empathy and
Yeah.
for your mom and just the sadness of what she was perhaps going through.
Yeah.
And like you said, reducing somebody to their own vulnerabilities
Yeah.
is not really fair to her, because she was so much like all of us. We are so much more of a person than just some of our vulnerabilities.
Yes. And at the same time, I also feel sad for me as a kid. I see kind of all of it. And I think, oh gosh, that was so much energy to expend to try to pretend we were a normal family. But then what's interesting is not only did it work, I had a lot of friends who would have killed to have my mom because at least she almost cared too much. But I've grown up, I have a dear friend whose mom is still alive. And it's not even to compare lives. It's just when you lose a parent young, I think you go through it. There is a bit of a victim where you're like, why me? Why? So I have that. But as I've gotten older and I see, for instance, my friend whose mom was just such a narcissist could give a care about her is actually in some ways, I think, so much more painful to wish you had something you didn't. That is so central and that you see other people have that in a way I'm like, wow, I know I lost my mom early, but I never doubted, does she love me? Does she want the best for me? Is she my cheerleader? Is that would just be beyond destabilizing for me. So it's a bunch of different feelings on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I want to say something too, that you are a normal family.
Yes, you're right.
These things that you're
Yeah.
grappling with and the things that you're talking about, and I think that that's what's so powerful and why I love just your willingness to be vulnerable and really genuine about this is normal. And
Yeah.
these tension points, the dealing with the real life, dealing with the real people, dealing with the impacts. You mentioned your ability to hold both sides.
Yeah.
It's like with your mom, you're just even describing being able to hold both.
Yeah.
She had her own stuff, demons that she was trying to deal with, and she was a great person, great mom, and central
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about that child and what that child, was going through, because you mentioned the
Yeah.
sadness about what the child was, what do you, as you have reflected as an adult looking back,
Yeah.
what is that feeling about that you've had to sort of struggle with and overcome and think about?
Well, it's so interesting because even this morning, I knew I had to go take my kids to camp and I knew I was going to be cutting it close to come here. So I thought, let me set up my recording stuff before I go because I'm always like racing in and every bit of scaffolding I can provide myself with ADHD is important. So this really weird thing happened where maybe it was because I knew I was talking to you. I don't know. I'm carrying the table in. And I had this like really wave of fear. And I don't even honestly remember what it was for. I thought, oh no, something. And then I felt scared of someone or something. I don't even know why. And then I literally thought, oh no, my mom's going to be upset, which I haven't had this happen in like probably 10 years. And then I thought, Casey, you're an adult and you have your own kids that you care for. And there's no one in your life that is scary to you right now. Realistically, things happen that are scary for sure. But I'm not scared of my husband. I don't have those. And it was this crazy feeling where I, for a second, was like transported. And it happened so quick that my normal brain couldn't take over and go, what are you afraid of? That I couldn't stop the feeling and be like, well, I'm 45. So it was so strange that happened this morning because it doesn't happen a lot. But I think when those things do happen, they imprint so deeply that similar, like when I said, when someone texts me and I think they're mad, or worse, if they are mad, because that happens too. I wish I could say every time it's fine. But then you're in a whole new world of problems if someone is really mad at you. And it's just, I think I do feel sad for a kid that is worried all the time that they're going to get in trouble or that, they've done something bad. but especially when it's confusing because you might not have. So you're like, well, what is bad or what is good? I don't know, because you're so mad about this, but you're great with that. And so you're kind of left just like, I don't know what to do, to be honest. But then there also was like a lot of freedom with who I was, and I'm firing kids across the street. I certainly wasn't like kind of eaten up with fear as a human, but I definitely had that feeling when I would like be walking home from school. Like, I don't know what I'm walking into. And I remember, I always think of it as like a car going up a roller coaster. When it like goes up and then you have that moment at the top and then you shoot down the roller coaster. And I could tell you my mom's mood from hello, if I called her, what tick of 100 things, 100 seconds we might have on a roller coaster. I could tell you if we're at the 40th second where we're almost at the top. I could tell you if we're at the top. I could tell you if we started down. I could just tell you from hello. And it's just tracking someone's moods so closely is, I think, a lot for a kid, because you don't have any time really to track your own moods, I think.
Or even understand them as a child.
Yeah,
totally. You don't really understand mood yet as a child.
Yeah,
you don't really comprehend how your thoughts and feelings are related to what you're physically experiencing and all of that.
Right.
So you don't really have that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sometime down the future, you'll have to write down as you figure out why you felt that this morning, and not that we're here to like figure that out at all, but I mean, I have to think that I don't know if you knew that this podcast was going to be at all touching on mental health and family and all of that.
I did. But it's funny because, again, that was like a hidden thought, though, because it was not conscious. I think it probably did have to do with that as I'm getting ready to pull out my, mic to talk with you about this.
Yeah.
It must have been there. But that's also, I think, part of a child who grows up with addiction is you do feel very protective of your parent. And that's baked into it. So as much as I'm also saying, like, my mom was amazing, I also know I'm still have that sense of, like, I have to be on guard for that parent and protect them. And so it's like, I want to talk about it, but I don't know. And I probably had that feeling too, where also I'm very comfortable, not to get into spirituality but I'm also so at peace with my mom and I's relationship now.
That's great.
And I'm a huge believer that you still have a relationship with someone when they pass. And it's not even religious or based in anything. I just always say, I think that the conversation can continue when people are here and when they're not. And honestly, the version of the relationship I have with my mom now is kind of, when I say what I always wanted, I don't want that to be construed like I'm saying it as though I wish my mom weren't here. Of course, that's not it. But given the reality that I live in, I really get the best parts of her.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's really beautiful. I think that the fact that you're able to hold both is so important here, because what I hear you talking about is that maybe that total inner gut of knowing that you could possibly be talking about family here, wanting to protect your mom, but wanting to also be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And
other people who might be listening, and they might say, wow, I had that, or, anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's reality.
Yeah.
And
hopefully that will help some other people.
Yeah.
But you've also got to give yourself the ability to be loyal to your experience.
Yeah.
Because as a child, when we are always in a position, not always, but oftentimes in a position to watch and follow somebody's mood, they become the priority and their feelings and needs and wants over ours.
Yeah.
And so often when you described a parent with those moods, whether it's because of addiction or something else, we can get pulled into worrying more about that than what our needs are.
100%. I wrote a memoir about my mom and I, and it was so interesting because that was the central thing I'm wrestling with. Do I put this out? It's the ultimate, like, yes, we all have these thoughts of, am I selling a parent out? Am I, But this is like, well, I'm on a stage where a platform where I'm putting this out via HarperCollins. People can read this and they can judge it, and they might judge her. And are they going to understand, and have I controlled this narrative enough? And all of those feelings. And I won't even take you into, but I really had to ask the universe and my mom for a sign. I really had to do that work of like, is this okay? Because I did tell my story. I told my part of it. And I really, the beauty of the memoir is so many people have reached out, and I think they could feel that. And that was my only hope of seeing both sides, in the sense that I think it was also like a tribute to my mom too, which is really what I wanted as well. But I wanted both.
So when you guys were kids and your mom, say, was sleeping all weekend in her bedroom or holed up in her bedroom, how were you making sense of that as a child?
I don't think I was at all. I was just, but everyone knows, like, when you're a kid, you're like, I guess this is what's happening in everyone's house. And then when you go to other people's houses, it's more like, it's not. And you're kind of like putting pieces together, like, then what is going on in mine? You just have all these questions, there's no one to answer them. And you're getting this creeping feeling like, or like when I go to this, speaking of my friend Amanda, her parents got divorced very young. And I remember when I would go to their house, it was just Diane and her two daughters. The carefree energy there was like, we actually don't have this addict that was in our lives. He's gone. And we're just here having kind of fun. And it felt very light. And then you kind of get to experience all those feelings, and you go to another friend's house and you're like, oh God, their dad yells and is scary. I want to get out of here. And, and my dad was my Girl Scout leader. And so everybody knew my dad, and he was until I was 16, which I know is sad. But everybody knew my dad and was so close to him. And my friend Amanda, even, like, my dad was like her dad. My dad had that quality with people. And I would go to their houses and be like, oh man, they have a dad that's one of those scary dads that yells. And nothing to me felt worse. It would be like, I don't like this, and everybody would have something you don't have or that you want, or then vice versa. But you start to feel that feeling in people's houses and think, in some ways, God, I just want to go back to my house. And in some ways, it's kind of nice here.
Okay, so let's talk about your ADHD if we can, because it's come up a lot. And I want to know, so you self-diagnosed yourself? Or you have...
I have been diagnosed formally, but I was having a sneaking suspicion.
And what were some of the big key things that stood out?
Everything. I mean, I am just so organized/disorganized. I can focus for 14 hours without even getting up to go to the bathroom on something I'm passionate about. But I will literally fall asleep if I'm having to hear something about math. Like, my brain shuts down. And I am, people love to say, like, oh, I can't find my sunglasses and they were on the top of my head. I'm like, I have lost 100,000 pairs of sunglasses. I'll be wearing them and I'll look for 40 minutes. Like, I have driven away from the gas station with the pump still in the car 3 times. And I had an assistant when I was an assistant.
Oh my gosh. That is clearly...
Yeah. And I didn't know why. I thought that was like so quirky and funny. But then I look back, because so many women are diagnosed late, especially in my generation. And I look back and I'm like, oh my God, all of these things where people made so much fun of me for having an assistant when I was like 24. I mean, you can't imagine. I mean, people were like, what? And I just stuck with it because I knew in my head, I'm not going to get where I need to go unless I have help.
Yeah. Is there any particular way that your ADHD impacts, like, your relationship with your husband, and then also your parenting, that you have to be really particular to work around?
Yes, every second. I mean, my husband really is so patient, because we laugh about this. And I also don't like when people say, oh, I'm OCD, or I'm this, I'm that, and you're not. So it's like, I always say, let me be the one that can show up late and say I'm a mess. Don't try to claim my diagnosis.
Yeah.
But my husband really is OCD. He genuinely works with a therapist on it, and he does amazingly, but he has that in him. So for the two of us to be married is like a joke. It's a sick joke.
A comedy.
Where I leave every single cabinet door open, and he's like, oh my God, it drives him nuts. I mean, the kids get stuff on my clothes with fingers. I could care less, and he's like, watch my white shirt. And so he is very tolerant because, I cannot keep things clean. I cannot, I try with every bit of my might to delegate and to outsource where I can afford to, because if there's something I don't do well, I must try to delegate it. And that has actually made me more money in my life. That's made me so much more successful than trying to do something over and over that I'm just not good at. It's so futile, I think, especially when you have so little time. Like, why do I need to prove to myself that I can cook? I can't cook because the executive functioning required to cook is so varied and so much more than anyone would ever think, that I'm putting in all the wrong ingredients. Oh, now I got to go up and and I forgot that, it's just endless amount of tiny decisions, and it's hell. And so it has affected my marriage, where for the better, I've finally decided, you know what? My husband, for his own mental health, he really likes the house clean. I do not have that ability. So we actually put more money towards a cleaning person than childcare, for instance. Like, these are the things I've kind of gone, wow, when I tell people how often we have someone come, they're shocked, and I'm like, that's fine that they feel that way. I don't think we would stay married if I didn't have help in that area. And just trying to quickly accept things. I like to come to quick acceptance and move on. Can't do that? Okay, have someone do that. Try to do that. Let my husband do that. I can't make the lunches. I can't. And but there's a lot of things I can do. I love the emotional work of parenting and all of that stuff, and trying to lean into my core strengths.
Yeah,
and
that's
I've
great.
truly abandoned everything else.
Yeah, that's great.
And I've spent too much time feeling bad about myself that I don't cook and that all these things. But that's where it helps to laugh, because I'm just like, yeah, I don't cook. I don't know what to tell you.
So I'm kind of curious how that dynamic that you kind of learned as a child of, being sensitive to the moods, walking on the edge, just being aware, and how has that played out in your adult relationships? Like, I don't know, let's just say your husband or.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really amazing I met my husband when I was 30. That's just one stray thought. I just think, it was a great time for me to meet someone, to have time to work on myself and kind of work all this stuff out. But I'll say, I have a lot of female friendships with very strong women that are very funny, and maybe a couple that are volatile and a couple that are, and I have such a capacity to be fine with people's big emotions. I really do. I'm just like, there they go again, yelling. And I think I have a ton of anger that I've wrestled with my whole life, and I'm a Scorpio, and for anyone who lives in LA. And I've just had to really get a hold of my own anger. So much anger, but also then really fun. But that can give people whiplash, because I'm so used to that. Like, it's almost, I'm not totally answering this, but if anything, when I met my husband, his parents were so sweet and steady that we would have like a huge fight. I'd like throw my phone into the wall, and then 2 seconds later, I'm like, oh, you want to go to the movies? And he is like, oh, he's like, I thought we were never going to speak to each other again. And I'm like, oh, what should we see? Where should we go? And he's just like found that so jarring.
And so I'm sure that you've talked with many people about this, but what have you discovered is underneath the anger?
I don't really know. I think a lot of it was, I'm such an achiever. I'm such a striver that there would be anger if I wasn't getting where I wanted to be. It would be a lot of self-directed anger, or if someone disappointed me, or if I was misunderstood, I would just lash out more. And then honestly, what was funny is that when I met my husband, he's so the opposite. I mean, to a degree where you would just be like, what a guy. He's so mild-mannered, and he hates conflict. And all of these things are actually great for me. Now, these things have affected him in his own life, but I can't worry about that. That's him, But what's great is that he said to me, very early on, and I was like so crazy about him, and he goes, I got to tell you, I'm not going to go for this. Throwing the phone and yelling. I won't do it. And I'm happy to talk through anything, and I'm okay if you are mad, but I'm not gonna like live where someone's like throwing a glass into a wall. Now again, this wasn't every day I was doing this, but he just said, I'm not gonna do it. And What makes me laugh so hard is I had tried so much therapy, so much this. I'm going to run. I'm going to meditate. I'm into this healer. I'm at the tarot card reader. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I just go, okay. And I haven't really done it since. And it was just kind of needed someone to say, actually, this is a boundary for me.
And then what about as a mother?
Yeah.
How do you reflect on that as a mother?
Well, all the time. I mean, that's the second phase of all this work is, of course, you're confronted with raising little children. And, my older son is very sensitive. And I think a lot of my friends who have older kids, they are the more kind of like, oh, I hope I'm doing right. And they're kind of that they want to hit their marks kind of thing. And my younger son is like, I'm the best. And just, he's like, I'm great. And I don't care who knows it. And you're like, whoa, just barreling through life like a wrecking ball. But I often think under the cover of an older brother who's like, Bear, stop, but I also don't want my older son to always feel he's responsible for everyone. And I will get the sense that he's riding on a mood of mine. If I ever do, it makes me very uncomfortable. But I've also come to learn sometimes he just is going to do that. He's very monitoring of everyone's moods. And I know because I did everything in my power, I really never screamed at them. I just don't do it. And honestly, to the point where my friend's like, I think you could scream more at those kids, but I'm not permissive, but I was so hell-bent when they were little, like I'm not going to be erratic because I know that feeling and your nervous system is so scary. Now, as I've had a third, some of those rules have fallen away.
So does your moods at all that you experience in yourself mirror at all your mom's? How are they different? How are they the same?
I definitely don't have that high, low, up and down, up and down, up and down. But I will say I had really bad postpartum depression. I also think a lot of my mom went through menopause really early. And I did too. And the times I've had the most up and downs have been really hormonal. And so also I'm looking back going, oh, I think my mom was also struggling with that. Because I just really, the bottom fell out. The really only time I've been, depressed, other than when my mom died, was really, the first 4 months of both my kids, too. Because I didn't carry my third one for just that reason, which is another mental health thing I love to just say, which is, while we're here, I just am such a huge believer. If you have the means, and I know not everybody does, but I did not carry my third because of mental health reasons. And people always kept trying to be like, oh, but you tried, right? And you couldn't. And I said, no, I didn't try. Nope, I didn't. Because I've seen in a girlfriend who had 2 instances of postpartum, she had a third, and it really kicked up a lot of mental illness. And I have seen it.
Right. Well, I really want to know also how when you do have a propensity to anger or you can, feel a lot, being a mother, a parent is really hard.
Yeah.
How in the world do you manage not bringing those strong emotions into your parenting?
I don't know. I just think I have such a strong boundary around it in my head that it's not going to happen. But they've seen me scream and yell. So it's both. It's like I will scream and yell finally if I'm at the end of my rope and no one's getting in the car, to put their stuff on, and I need to motivate everyone and I'm frustrated. But what I'm not going to do is scream and yell at a kid for some emotional thing they've done or said or something so crazy and out of left field or... So I'm just not going to do it. And it's very similar to when my husband just said, I'm not going to do this. It's like, well, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, because that experience as a child, worrying perhaps about your mom, or at least the feelings that were happening just around her, knowing how you grew up and some of the things you were dealing with. What's the message that you kind of want to send to your children?
Honestly, I think you don't have to worry about me. You're in your own fun in life and you have your own disappointments and kids are so selfish. They really are in that little world of their emotions are everything. And just letting that be the case and not letting my kind of sadness or if I'm ever angry intrude on their kind of joy or honestly their own anger or whatever it is by me being like, you shouldn't be this or you shouldn't be feeling that. No one likes to be told they shouldn't be feeling anything. But it's hard. I think it's hard, Like my daughter last night, I went to hug her before bed and she just took my arm and pushed it off. Now, for anyone else, that might be like, oh yeah, that's a 3-year-old and that happens. With me, I'm like, oh my God, I went to all this trouble to have her and she doesn't like me. And she really doesn't like me, but I see she likes my husband and she seems to like our babysitter, but she hates me. My brain will really. And then yesterday, I literally physically forced myself to say the words I said, oh, if you don't want to give me a hug, you don't have to. And then I left. Now, of course, in my heart, I'm like, she hates me. But, just trying to know what is right and not succumbing to the putting my needs on them.
I'm so glad to hear that you put that permission there for her, because it's so important for kids to know that they have the right to call boundaries.
Yeah.
And
she probably feels how needy
Yeah.
I am for love and is, not needy, but, sometimes kids, they just don't want to give you what you want in a way, it's not about me. Like she hates me.
Right. That's the key, right? It's probably really not about you. It's really about her. Like she just doesn't have that need and doesn't want that need met.
Doesn't want it.
Right then
and then
there.
Sometimes she does, but not in that moment.
Well, I just feel like I could talk for hours more with you. I just don't even know how to shut this down because I could just go on and on and on with you. And
thank you for having me. This has been so great.
You being a celebrity and being in the public eye, at what point did you decide to be vocal and public about your own life struggles, your own mental health, and to talk about those things?
I kind of, in a way, always, or definitely in my late 20s, like early 30s, I just thought, mainly because I started doing my podcast. And when I tell you the amount of women and people and guys too that would reach out and be like, oh my God, thank you so much for saying that about that. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then things that I thought were a mistake, like one time I happened to cry on the podcast, which is about the Real Housewives, by the way, but has kind of developed into so much more, actually. And one time I cried because I saw this whole table of actors doing this movie and they were sitting next to me at a restaurant. And I just felt so sad I wasn't at that table. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, oh, they're over there. And I'm letting this really take me down as though I've never acted in my life or anything. And I kind of cried a little. And then my partner, Danielle, said, oh, really nicely built me up and not in a, in a really like nice friend way. And the outpouring of people, I couldn't even believe it. They're like, oh my gosh, I so feel that when you almost feel like you want to be at a table that you're not at and, proverbially or whatever. And then from there, I was like, well, and then we started talking about postpartum. And then my friend, my partner had so much trouble with fertility. And then we kind of realized like, the more we talk about it, it's actually helping people not to be so cheesy. And so then when I wrote my book, The Wreckage of My Presence, about my mom and I thought, and then I've gotten such beautiful letters where people are like, I'm listening to this while my dad's in hospice, it's in my headphones and I'm just listening and you're making me laugh. And I think the combo of being vulnerable and honest with people, but with humor, I just realized, again, not that I'm so great, but I think people are happy to hear humor, but also the truth, like Terms of Endearment.
Well, thank you for sharing so much with us. I really
course.
appreciate you being here. It's been a lovely time. And where can people find you?
Oh my gosh, I'm at Casey Rose Wilson and I have a podcast called Bitch Sesh.
In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing, a national nonprofit mental health organization. You can learn more about Nexus and how to support our mission at nexusfamilyhealing.org. The show is produced by John Moe with music from Jeremy Messersmith. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and write a review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.